In a world where Carolina Panthers fans have an insatiable thirst for Panthers news and opinions, only one podcast roars ferociously. It's the C3 Panthers Podcast.
Welcome to an impromptu edition of the C3 Panthers Podcast. I am your co-host, Cody Lashney, joined tonight by the professor himself, Tony Dunn. Tony, how are you, brother?
Well, man, I'm excited that football news is starting to trickle down, and not only are we getting the excitement and the hype of the offseason, but there's a lot of big names floating around on all levels, whether it comes to quarterback, offensive line, and it's nice to see we finally get some things that are new potentially and that offer us promise and hope.
They are, man. And, it involves a very controversial figure, right? It involves the one and only Deshaun Watson. Panther Nation, I want to lay some things out before we jump into it. And as a matter of fact, before we even do that, let's do a quick roll call to some of these badass Panther faithful family we have in the chat room. I'm talking my man Drew, KTZ123, Off Grid, Landon Tripp, Panther Pickle, Panthers Are Kings, Panthers Rule, Ted Sims, The Duck 123, Thomas Tomlinson, and Tim Estes, Tony Dunn, and nothing to it but to do it, brother. Let's roll. I want to talk about Deshaun Watson because regardless of what anyone thinks about Deshaun, where there is smoke, there is fire. And time again, the Carolina Panthers and Panther fans are having to see reports on how interested David Tepper specifically is in one Deshaun Watson. Now, Deshaun is set to go to court tomorrow. He's going to go in front of a grand jury in which they might put federal charges against him. It would require a lot of evidence, but either way, we're going to get some kind of news tomorrow. Even in spite of all of those things, we continuously hear that David Tepper is all in. And to make sure that we're sourcing everything that we do here, and that I'm not just some Clemson fan blowing smoke, this is from Pro Football Network. Panthers are extremely interested in trading for Deshaun Watson. In particular, the Carolina Panthers are seriously engaged in wanting to trade for the three-time Pro Bowl selection, with one source characterizing the level of interest as all in. Panthers owner David Tepper previously hired an investigator to thoroughly look into Watson's legal issues. Tepper has remained extremely interested in possibly acquiring Watson, who has a no-trade clause in his $156 million contract and would have to sign off any possible trade for over a year, according to sources. It's no secret around the training facility of the NFC South franchise that the team is intrigued by the possibility of acquiring the former Clemson star. So, Tony, with that in mind, we're going to do a little bit of a thought experiment tonight, right? I'm going to put on my general manager hat, and you and the rest of my Panther faithful, you are going to play the parts of David Tepper. And I am going to try and pitch you on one of 4 trade scenarios that I have available to try and potentially get Deshaun Watson. Again, this is not to say that Deshaun is innocent. This is not to say that he is or isn't a good person. This is just a thought, an experiment, rather, on what would be required to make this happen. Before we go further, you want to? Yeah, go ahead. Jump on.
Before we get started, I feel like we should clear the air on a couple of subjects regarding Deshaun Watson. You said whether or not he's a good person or not. I'd like to clarify that whether or not he's a good person or not, these events did or did not happen. We've realized that the world's money-powered interests and the NFL, no one cares. Sadly, that we want to virtue signal, as you like to say. We want to say that, hey, I can't believe an organization would stoop to such levels. The idea of him potentially going to Pittsburgh, there's some irony there. People have pointed to with Ben Roethlisberger's history and past. You could even say that the Carolina Panthers' history and past, there's some irony given what happened to how Jerry Richardson's less than celebratory exit went. But what I just realized is, man, you just wait the news cycle out. Who cares? Who cares? And I'm not saying that I agree with that being the case.
Sure.
And I'm not saying that that is the ideal world that to live in. But it is the world we live in, just for the fact that COVID doesn't exist anymore. And now it's just, it's the Ukraine and gas. Next. So that's the first thing I want to clarify on the Deshaun Watson. The second is really probably the most important to me.
Yep.
Into thinking about, and that is Deshaun Watson's taking a hard line on basically fighting back against these allegations and not caving.
Yes.
He has stood his ground in a way that arguably you could say maybe hurt him, in other ways helped him. But the real story behind this is that he wanted to leave Houston before this news broke. And he held significant leverage, it felt like, with his organization about him not coming. He sits out a season, and on top of that, is in charge of controlling his destination to a degree. And we've heard that Carolina Panthers have had interest in Deshaun Watson, and he did not have interest in them. So I think there's something to be thought about is, what does Deshaun Watson want, and is Carolina a place that he wants to go? And it seems like the narrative of it not being a destination that he would consider seems to be losing some strength.
It does, especially when you look at some of the biggest names that were once upon a time attached to Deshaun Watson have in some way, shape, or form come out and either endorsed another quarterback or said that they are just flat out not interested in trading for Deshaun Watson. So even when you hear rumors and reports that once upon a time Deshaun said no to the Panthers and wouldn't lift his no trade clause for us, times have changed. And, now there's a bunch of different suitors that are potentially interested in bringing Deshaun Watson in. Once again, I want to make it a point to say this, right? No one is saying that Deshaun is innocent. No one is saying that he is guilty. This is purely based on the Carolina Panthers' reported interest in Deshaun Watson and how the Carolina Panthers might be able to make this trade work and what they would have to do in order to make this happen. I know that this is going to continue to be a very lively and spirited conversation for as long as the Panthers are a part of this. And quite frankly, Panther fans are going to have to ask themselves some real questions about what they think of this. Should it be made? Should it happen? But hey, man, that's what we're here for, right?
I dare say that it is a touchy situation.
You can definitely say that it is indeed a touchy situation. So let's just jump into this, man. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe. Thanks for being a part of the show tonight. Once again, I want to reiterate, I am not, in fact, the Panthers general manager. These are all theoretical. So before you want to go and, chop my head off in the town square, give me a minute to kind of go through all of these and kind of sell you on them a little bit, right? So I put forth 4 different trade scenarios. And before I go into each of them, there's one commonality between all 4 of them. And I want to say this before we jump in, so that way, I don't have to explain it every single time, right? With these ideas that I have put forward, I am attempting to keep the Panthers' 6th pick in the draft this year. Normally, you think if you're trading for Deshaun, that 6th pick is gone. This is my half-hearted attempt to try and get around that and continue to keep that 6th pick So that way the Panthers can either upgrade and draft an offensive lineman or potentially even another defensive player to help on the other side of the ball. Tony Dunn, are you ready to look at these scenarios?
Yes, sir.
Let's jump into it. Now, these are kind of expensive, but again, it's for a reason. And there's a bunch of different ones. So let's jump into this. Trade scenario number 1 is all on defense that we're going to be trading away a lot of our defensive players. We send the Houston Texans Brian Burns, Jeremy Chin, and CJ Henderson for the 2023 first round pick, and our 2023 first round pick, 2024 first round pick, and 2025 first round pick. So this is 3 players and 3 first round picks. And it allows us this year to keep all of our drafts and potentially even trade back to further fill out the roster. Now, I already see all the comments and hell no and the faces. I want to explain this a little bit more, right? So understand that if you're bringing Deshaun Watson to the team under this scenario, you are keeping the entirety of our offense intact. Christian McCaffrey, DJ Moore, and Robbie Anderson, and our young receivers that we drafted last year would still be a part of the football team. So you would have an offense that is ready to roll with the franchise quarterback in place. Another thing that is it's better for them is that the players that we would be sending them, they're not very expensive. So all these guys are young players that have not gotten to that second contract thus far. So they're not taking on a bunch of extra cash either. Tony, your initial kind of reactions going forth just looking at that.
All right, this trade scenario?
Yes.
Gloves
off. Tell me I'm a psycho if you must.
It's a little rich. Rich. Here is the chat room. They're going to see the names. They're going to see the 3 first round picks, and there you go. Like somebody said, if it's going to cost that much, who said it? Let me find it. If it's going to cost that much, we should just pick Malik Willis.
Here he is.
Yeah, that's so. Look, that does feel super rich there. All right, but I want to point out a couple of things. Like in some cases, I think at first the kind of initial shock is a lot. But if you kind of peer back into it, I don't really care about CJ Henderson at all. That's the equivalent of a 3rd round pick, right? So like losing him doesn't upset me. Brian Burns, nice player on our defense, a guy that has been available, young, I feel like is getting better, could be get better, but also kind of shows you the problem with defensive ends when you draft. I told you, man, I've been telling you guys, defensive ends, unless there's a few freaks, but a lot of them take a couple of years to develop into the NFL, and really become beasts. And I'd say Brian Burns is kind of still in that development. So look, by the time, we're going to have to make a decision on him if we're going to sign him long term, or he's not going to be part of the team anyway. I think the name on this list that kind of bothers me the most is Jeremy Chin. And it just feels like this
more so than Burns.
Yeah. First, we get a little bit more time. Jeremy Chin, well, no, he was a 2nd-year pick, so we won't get the 5th-year option with him. But I feel like Jeremy Chin has stepped in and played consistently well in his first 2 seasons. He had a crazy breakout, awesome season his rookie year. But even last year, I did not feel like Jeremy Chin was a liability on our team at all. So he's the only player name up here. So, I think that and then the 3 first rounds, I would say is there a way to get Watson with it just not being this expensive? Particularly, take Jeremy Chin's name off this list, and I might consider it.
Okay. Yeah, and and also just to play a little bit of devil's advocate here, Jeremy Chin was a late 2nd round pick as well. So, a lot of these guys, were kind of diamond in the rough type of players. C.J. Henderson was a first-round pick, but he fell a little bit as well. And
that's why I want to keep Jeremy Chin. Like, I want a guy that is a commodity. And I've been thinking about it a lot today about the CMC trade offer talk. And I don't want to go too far on that. But
that's actually up next.
these draft picks are just theoretically helpful to your team until they are helpful to your team. And I would say that Jeremy Chin has probably been the most successful out of all of these three players.
Yeah. And then another thing to point out, too, is that Denver gave up 2 firsts, 2 seconds, plus 3 players. And that's somebody, Russell Wilson's over 30-something years old. He's a little, Deshaun Watson's younger. He's more in his prime. So, yeah, let's go on to pick or to the trade scenario number 2. Now, this one, it's in the same mindset, but it's with players that have already kind of been linked to a trade scenario. And it would these are, it's a lot of money that would be able to come off of.
We're getting, right? Man, the Houston, you're acting like this guy. This is like getting traded for Aaron Rodgers.
Younger than Aaron Rodgers. So, by the way, and I have no problem admitting when I've done something. So the chat is saying that you can't trade 2025 picks yet. I've never heard that before, but
hold on. There's a rule. The rule is this: you can only go so many years ahead. Let me see.
Yeah,
Brad
said that.
Go ahead.
I was not aware of that rule, so that kind of messes up my scenario here. The mindset was I was trying to do something that would allow us to continue to build upon the team this year, and knowing that we would be able to get rid of some dollars in these contracts.
It says this, at least just initial. Actually, maybe it says it says 4 years advance. It's my initial Google, so that would actually work. Let me see. You keep going.
Yeah, well, so then if that's 4 years, then that would be right around that wheelhouse. So this next trade scenario is, like I said, 2 players that we have already heard rumors potentially about a trade. That's Christian McCaffrey, Robbie Anderson, and Shaq Thompson. Now, our linebacking core is already kind of decimated. So Shaq Thompson, believe it or not, was one of the names that was hardest to put on this list, just because of, we really don't have any other players around him. But CMC and Robbie Anderson, Christian McCaffrey has been hurt. He's missed 23 of the last 33 games, but he's an incredibly talented, physically gifted athlete. And Robbie Anderson, that gives them an over-the-top weapon for their young quarterback over there in Houston and Davis Mills. It takes away a lot of money off of our book. So, by the way, this accounts for almost $20 million this year between the 3 of them, if you did send these players away. Also, and another thing that we have to be very open and honest about is that this year, if we were to trade for Deshaun Watson, the Carolina Panthers would be on hook for around $35 million of his contract that we would be paying to him this year. So the more money that we're able to get off of our team, pretty much, would also benefit us a little more. Tony, what do you think about trade scenario number 2?
I don't want to trade Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah, I saw you put this online. You said it last Tuesday as well.
Yeah, is that think about this. Is that and I know you're gonna have to say if healthy, right? True. But there was a point that people thought that Aaron Rodgers was deteriorating because of his health, and then he comes back and wins the NFL MVP. I don't feel like CMC's health is out of the question, and I was just thinking, what it would take for me to trade Christian McCaffrey straight up. Right. I mean, right. So think about that as like a straight up trade. I feel like he is worth. A lot of people say he's worth a first round pick, but a late first round, and that stinks, man. I think CMC when he's on the field, he's like a top 5 player in the NFL. So I just rather have him. So can we get this trade done again? One name too rich for me. One draft pick too rich. Can we do this with 2 draft first rounds rather than 3? And then leave CMC in there. He counts as one of those first round draft picks.
Yeah.
I like having the idea of putting Deshaun Watson and Christian McCaffrey together.
Yeah, and that's really that was my thought throughout this whole thing too. You might as well do what you can to keep this offense intact. So that way, at least okay, you might need to add to the offensive line a little bit more, but you already have all the weapons that you would need for Deshaun Watson to be able to come in here and be successful. And again, like this is flexible as well. So, 3 or 4 years, we may or may not be able to trade that 2025 first round pick. I would do it in a heartbeat if it meant that we could keep this year's draft and potentially take another offensive lineman with that 6th pick. But yeah, I agree, Tony. The only problem is, and I told you this last Tuesday, is that Christian McCaffrey, he might never have more value than right now. So we might be able to get
his value's got to be at the least right now. All he has to do is have one good season, and all of a sudden he's back to we're just like all of a sudden we're just thinking of him as another great player.
Yeah. Yeah. So
I'm
that
still
was
trying to find this damn rule about how far ahead we can trade. I was just in a Reddit thread. I saw 4 years.
Okay.
But,
yeah, I believe it's 4-2, but either or, you're looking at something like this. If you have to, take off one of these first round picks and then send them 3 players, I think that would be good because they're wanting to contend as well. They also have a bunch of draft picks. You want to say something?
I'm trying to think of which one is more attractive. Trade 1 or 2 right now to me.
Yeah, well, we've got 2 more.
When it comes to the players, I'm just thinking the players because that's the only difference between the 2 trades is the 3 players. So one's defensive sided, one's kind of balanced offense and defense. Don't care about losing Shaq Thompson. All right, next one.
Well, and one more thing I wanted to say before we go forward too. One of the things that you're going to notice, much to the chagrin of many of you, I'm sure, is that you're not going to see Sam Darnold's name in any of these trades. And one of the reasons why you're not is because even if there are no real criminal charges brought against Deshaun Watson, even if they're misdemeanor or whatever, it's still very reasonable that the NFL could suspend Deshaun Watson at some point this year for some duration of the season. So if they decide to suspend Deshaun for the first, 3 or 4 games of the season, well, then at least you have Sam Darnold, who is at least in a backup role for you now going forward, for the rest of the season. Then you're going to be able to go to Deshaun Watson. So to everyone who wants to see Sam as a part of this, sorry, you're not going to see it tonight. Going forward, again, just trying to mix and match here. Trying to maybe give him a little bit of defense, a little bit of offense. This one, I have Robbie Anderson, Shaq Thompson, and Jeremy Chin. Now, I know how you feel about Jeremy Chin.
But this actually speaks to me a little bit more than the last one. This might be my favorite one so far.
Okay, tell me why. Just what's your initial?
Well, because I like Jeremy Chin. I like Jeremy Chin out of the list of those players. I think he is a big time contributor to this team. But at the same time, like I wouldn't put him as a top 5 defensive player in the league, or something like that. While I would put Christian McCaffrey in the top 5 offensive player of the league when he's available. And I know everybody's going to say, well, he hasn't been available. I don't think his availability is a question of durability at this point. I think in past, and just to continue to beat this horse a little bit, I think in 2020, we shut him down a little prematurely, and in a way that was just trying to protect him for the future of the organization. So I think if we were in a playoff run, all of a sudden, man, Christian McCaffrey would have been available a lot more than he was. Again, I think that would have gone to this case as well this year, is that if we really felt that our team was significantly like a contender, they wouldn't have put him on IR. They would have just kept him out until the hamstring got better or whatever it was and had him ready for the playoffs. You know, I mean, we're talking about, who was it that recently just came back and played in the playoffs after tearing his Achilles at the beginning of the season or something this year?
I know Eric Waddle, but he was on the sofa. He was just retired.
Yeah, there was somebody that like got hurt in the like first week of the season, and they ended up coming back. So look, I think that we could find a way to get a safety that could fill Jeremy Chinn's shoes a lot easier than we could just go out and find somebody who can fill Christian McCaffrey's shoes.
Is it Cam Akers who you were thinking of?
Yes.
Yeah, it was Cam Akers. Yeah.
So right now, this is the most attractive to me. Right now, it would be awesome if you could do this. If you could, again, try to find a way to get this like 2 firsts and 2 seconds or something like that, maybe. You know, the 3 first-round picks and 3 players is the top dollar. Like, I mean, that's like that was their asking price at the beginning of all of this nonsense.
Right. And Tony, that was my thought process behind this. Again, I may be mistaken on whether or not this is actually a possibility to do. It's either 3 or 4 years that you're not allowed to go in advance. But the mindset, again, for all of this was that the Panthers would be able to send this and try and keep their draft the same this year, because the Panthers don't have a lot of draft capital this year. We don't have a 2nd-round pick. We don't have a 3rd-round pick. More importantly, if we were able to keep that 6th pick, we would potentially be able to trade back and pick up more players, maybe pick up another offensive lineman, another high-end linebacker, and see if that's something that they would be interested in. And then again, I do like this a little more than the first one because Brian Burns isn't a part of it. And I think the fact that, we're not going to more than likely see Hassan Reddick coming back, to me, you're talking about half of your sack production out the window to then move Brian Burns on top of that. It would be tough to do, man. It would definitely be tough to do. But I do agree. I do like this a little more than the first one, even though I think the first one's probably more enticing to them. The last one that I threw together was Robbie Anderson, C.J. Henderson, and Brian Burns. I even thought about throwing Derek Brown into this equation, but Derek Brown to me is, he is a rule guy, is someone that Rule and the Panthers drafted, and I think he's probably more. This might be blasphemous to some of you, but I would say that Derek Brown potentially holds a bigger role on the Panthers defense than even Brian Burns does when he's playing his best, just because, everything flows around that big defensive tackle in the middle of the football field. So, but what I put forth was Robbie Anderson, C.J. Henderson, and Brian Burns. It gives them the over-the-top guy in Robbie Anderson and 2 young, good defensive players for them to be able to continue to build off of. What's your initial reaction to this list?
Yeah, I think that these trade scenarios, again, top dollar. One of the things I want to kind of where I'm thinking about that is maybe the reason you've put together such kind of generous packages is like, hey, we want Watson, and we want to make sure we're the team that gets him, not the Steelers, not the Seahawks. Like, we're ready to give you whatever it takes to get them. So I think that like 3 first-round, 3 players, that's an interesting tactic. Again, I'd love to see something cheaper. But if it's going to be like one of these players is going to keep me from getting Deshaun Watson, I don't want to, come to the party, come cheap. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But take the girl to dinner and be cheap about it. I'd love to have this less than 3 first-round picks again. Continue to go back to this. This is probably my favorite player-wise.
Okay.
Look, is Robbie Anderson replaceable? Replaceable. And look, I like Robbie Anderson. I mean, and then after this past year, I think we lived so much in the moment. Robbie had a down year. Everybody had a down year. He really had a bad start though. And it wasn't just on the quarterback play. It was a lot on him in the beginning, dropping balls everywhere. There's some questions about his focus. It seems to be very critical of other people and very forgiving of himself when it comes to his play. I don't care about CJ Henderson at all. Like this dude, man, I don't want to hear he's a top 10 pick. I don't care. So was Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold was a top 10 pick. So I don't care. Just because you're a top 10 pick doesn't mean crap. He hasn't done jack. And so, like, really, but like you said, he's a player that was of a high draft status, which means he has some athletic traits that translate in the NFL. And he's young, and he's on that rookie contract. That's like probably the most attractive player on this list to another team in a way, because they get him for the longest amount of time for the cheapest amount of money.
Yeah. And
Brian Burns, we're going to have to negotiate with him going forward. If we don't, look, we're already going to sign the 5th-year option. Is Brian Burns an elite defensive end in this league? And I don't know if he's an elite defensive end. Right now, I would call him a very good defensive, and like he's a very good pass rusher. I don't think I think we're better when he's on the field. I just wonder, like, what. I think it'd be it's always hard to replace good players. Like you would have to go and pay a defensive end and free agency. They're expensive. You'd have to go ahead and start looking at them in the draft. Again, they take a long time to get unless you're drafting them at like 6 or something like that. But I think I'm down with this is probably my favorite player list here.
Yeah, and again, listen, I see all the people in the chat room saying that this is way too expensive, way too much. Again, you have to understand that whether or not you want Deshaun or you don't want Deshaun, it's irrelevant because David Tepper wants to try and make this happen. So if David Tepper is going to try and make this happen, the Panthers would actually have to give them an offer that says, like you mentioned, Tony, hey, we're legitimate contenders. Like we want this trade to go through. You have to give them players that are really good players that they would want to have on their team and enough draft picks to be able to continue to go forward and be able to build. Also, you got to think we're still going to have all of our, second, in between 2nd to 7th round picks going forward in these 2023, 2024, and potentially 2025 drafts. You're still going to have, all but your 1st round pick to help you to build your team going forward into the future. So, yeah, these are expensive. They'll blow your hair back. But if you're talking about a player who is in his prime, who is at the most important position in the NFL, you're going to have to get used to something that looks at least somewhat similar to this. The number of players might fluctuate. The number of picks might fluctuate. But those players and those picks are going to be premium. They're going to be highly valued, or else the Texans are going to balk at us.
I don't know. I think you could probably get away with. I think the Texans would probably be more interested in draft picks than players. So I wonder if we could trim this deal down and keep Brian Burns. This one right here. Robbie Henderson, 3 first-round picks. Because here's the thing is with Brian Burns is you're going to have to replace him. He's a starter. And we're going to have to find another starter. And if it's a lateral, right, if you're going to find a guy who gets 10.5 sacks, that would be awesome. But that's going to be difficult to do. So that replacement might be a downgrade somewhat. The very best is probably a lateral move. And I don't know if you're going to want to use that number 6 pick on a defensive end right away. I don't know if that helps you in the immediacy get this offense cooking. So I'm kind of in this. If we could do this without Brian Burns being on this list, if we could do Robbie Anderson, CJ Henderson, 3 first-round picks, I think it would it could be rich enough for them and also valuable enough for us to do it.
Yeah. And Tony, I believe you also said you liked which one was it? Was it this one you
This
said?
one, yeah.
Yeah. Again, like this is also, if you moved Robbie Anderson and Shaq Thompson, you would move 2 of our biggest contracts that we currently have, right? And then you look at Jeremy Chin. Jeremy Chin's very young, but again, he's a box safety. He's a nickel safety. He's a linebacker. He has a lot of value at a bunch of different positions too. So, you have to think what kind of player would actually wet their beak and get them to have an appetite for him. I think out of the ones that I kind of threw together, I would say this scenario, trade scenario 3, is probably the one that I would be the most interested in.
Well, that would be the best for the Panthers. This would probably be the best for the Panthers. The problem is another team. Well, a lot of the Robbie Anderson money's guaranteed, so they're not going to take on a giant contract. The Shaq one, I think this is like what I try to think about is how easily replaceable are the players that are leaving. And I think some of that is just based on the amount of money they get paid per their position group. And like a linebacker and a safety are cheaper positions than a defensive end.
Yeah.
So if you're going to go into free agency, and look, you're going to have to go into free agency, probably get a linebacker right anyway. So I don't know. I think you could, but I think that would be cheaper than trying to go into free agency and find a defensive end. So I think this would be best for the Panthers. I'm trying to think of which one would be most attractive to the Texans. Go back to 4. Yep, I think the 4 is probably more attractive to the Texans right now because of the 2 players on the young deals, the cheap deals, Henderson, Brian Burns. But Henderson ain't that great of a player. This is probably more attractive. Yeah, let's go back to 1 and 2. So right now, I think
I
4.
think number 1 is probably number 1 to me is the one that I think they would probably be most interested in. Just even though it's all defense, you're talking about Brian Burns, who just went to the Pro Bowl, Jeremy Chin, who is a young, dynamic football player, and CJ Henderson, who we just talked about. He might, he isn't proven yet, but he is a top 10 pick. He is very physically gifted, and he's someone that he fits a position of need for him or for the Texans because they've been needing to upgrade their defensive backfield for a long time anyway. And out of all these 3 players that they would be taking onto their team, that's a little over $8 million between the 3 of them. You're really not even paying that much for them once you take on their contract. Now, this would be the steepest for us. Trade scenario 1 right here is the hardest for us to swallow. But the one major benefit to this one is you get to keep the entirety of our offense the exact same as it is. Keep in mind that even 2 years ago, DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson were 1,000-yard receivers. The year before that, Christian McCaffrey went 1,000 and 1,000. And, again, under this scenario, you would be able to keep that 6th pick, maybe be able to take a Charles Cross or Evan Neal if he falls, and continue to add upon that offensive line. You would have an offense that's ready to go. I think this would be the hardest for us to swallow, though.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think. Look, I'm not a fan of the Panthers defense. Look, this is an unpopular position with most fans. I'm not overly impressed by our defense right now. I don't think it's bad. I just think that the statistics that keep people saying how good it was are sort of misleading. I feel like it was better than average, our defense. And in the beginning, it looked really good for a stretch. But then I think about some of the teams we were playing. And really what I'm thinking too is our defense going to be that next year? And we don't know what our defense is going to be. It's going to look significantly different.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
potentially
Jermaine Carter
Gilmore.
Jr. is not going to be there.
Yeah.
Hassan Reddick's not going to be there.
Dante Jackson.
I don't want to hear like Gilmore. We all knew that wasn't going to be there, but the Gilmore thing kind of worked out for us. We actually just moved up a draft pick by getting him. We knew that was a rental, or at least I did. So I don't think that like we can just count on saying, oh, we're destroying our defense when we don't really know what it's going to be. Brian Burns is the hardest player on this list to replace for us because we don't have Hassan Reddick anymore. You know, and like, I mean, what do you really, I mean, think about what the options you would have to have YGM be a starter and you got to find another one. I mean, it's possible, but I mean, it would be a lot easier if we could get away with this without it being Brian Burns on the list. Like for us, just the health of our team on the defensive side, or else there's going to be a lot of unknowns.
Yeah, they really. By the way, I keep on seeing a lot of comments like this, talking about us. What does it matter that we keep our offense the same? Our offense wasn't good last year. Yeah, our offense hasn't been good because we haven't had a quarterback that's worth a damn for what it feels like 5 years now.
And an offensive line that was very bad, but is not going to be the same again. So it could go from very bad to okay, maybe even from very bad to decent or better than decent quickly, especially when you see some of the names around. You're almost wondering, is that like, can you do some things in trades that are going to help you? I mean, you got to get Watson. I'm just kind of thinking, as I saw that look, is Eric Fisher, the guy from the Colts, is being released, Pro Bowl left tackle. There's Pro Bowl guards being released. There's a lot of offensive linemen this year. We can really quickly improve our offensive line through free agency. And you almost wonder if you could make a trade with a team, a player trade to get a good offensive lineman. I think the Cowboys are in talks with La'el Collins. He might be a trade there. I saw that he might be getting traded. That'd be some shit. La'el Collins, we could have had him. Anyway, I mean, I think this is, you've kind of convinced me this is that the team with Deshaun Watson would be so radically different.
Yes.
So quickly. Is don't overly be freaked out by either how much you got to cost trade for the future. I think it's really about how much do you weaken the team that you already have at the moment. Like, can you absorb it? Right. And that's where I think the defensive end, like the Brian Burns, is just going to be the hardest to absorb. Even with this, is like, I want to keep Christian McCaffrey. I really do. But to be honest, you know what I'm saying? It would probably be easier to absorb him leaving.
Yeah.
Just in production, just straight production. You can replace it a little bit cheaper. You get running backs a dime a dozen in free agency. Yeah. And so you could get a body that can play and can run and do a lot of things okay. So it wouldn't be the worst. I think that God, I hate to say that. Maybe this one is.
Out of all these players that I've listed in these scenarios, how many of them are truly irreplaceable? I mean, truly, Brian Burns, listen, I don't want to make it seem like I'm shitting on the Panthers players. I'm not. I'm trying to look at this from a rational perspective and from a front office perspective. How easy is it to replicate the numbers and the stats and the things that these players do for us? Again, I maintain that one of the hardest players to have to part ways with actually is Shaq Thompson, and that's just because of the state of our linebacking core right now. Jermaine Carter Jr. is probably going to be out the door. We don't have a legitimate middle linebacker, so to speak, on the roster, unless you want to try Frankie Louvu there, but that's not guaranteed. So you're having to look at how hard is it to replace these kinds of players going forward. And again, look at this year. If Brady Christensen and Deontay Brown go on to be starting offensive linemen for the Carolina Panthers, those guys were drafted in the 3rd and 6th round, respectively. So it's not like you can't find these diamonds in the rough later in the draft to continuously build your football team. And I mean, if you look at even what the Rams have done, they are not shy about giving up first-round picks if it means bringing in the right players to build your football team. So I think
a big question too. Another one is not only how replaceable are these players or their production replaceable, but what are the thoughts? What are the Panthers' thoughts about Brian Burns' future in Carolina? Like, are they, if he goes out and has 10 sacks next year, are they going to pay him what it takes to keep him? Are they going to franchise tag him? Or are they going to let him walk? It would be crazy to say we're not going to make this trade because we want to keep Brian Burns, but then not give him an extension.
Right.
So some of this will tell us what they really think. I don't think there's any player that's untouchable, but I do think this is if the Panthers see Brian Burns as being a feature and a fixture of their defense going forward, they're going to try to find another way to do it. And that defensive end is hard to fix, bro. It's hard to cook on the defensive line.
It is.
There's a reason them Bosa boys make so much damn money. There's a reason that people are going crazy right now about Khalil Mack going to the Chargers. And Khalil Mack's old now.
Yeah, well, he's older.
Khalil Mack got like 2 first-round picks. The Bears gave like 2 first-round picks for like Khalil Mack. Think about that. So if you give 2 first-round picks for Khalil Mack, and it seemed like they actually got the better end of the deal because those other guys that they traded for those picks, they never panned out for those teams.
Yeah.
Then that kind of makes it say, you know what, maybe 3 first-rounders for Deshaun Watson ain't that bad. And maybe you can start thinking about maybe, Cody, you got to start thinking, I don't know, maybe we could even if they need this year's first-round pick, if they can send us back a 2 or a 3, why not? Why not? We can go find a center in the 3rd round.
Oh yeah, I already have my eyes on a couple. There are more than one way to skin a cat. That's something I heard a lot growing up, and I think that that's true. There are a lot of different ways that you can do this. Again, to me, I love a lot of these players, but none of them are, they don't equal up to the value of what a Deshaun Watson does bring to you. If you're just talking about the player on the field, Deshaun Watson represents a top 5 NFL talent. He really is that kind of a player. Pushing the ball downfield, driving it into tight windows, reading the field.
How many years has he demonstrated that? How many seasons did he do it before this all mess happened? Because I know he got a new contract. I know he had that big season the year before this happened, right? Like 35 touchdowns, 7 interceptions or something, 35-5. By the way, I just heard this. Can you believe this? Is that Carson Wentz had like 34 touchdowns and 7 picks? Like his numbers were not that terrible. I think he fumbles the ball a lot more than he does.
Colts fans will tell you that he had like 1 million dropped interceptions. So that the numbers should have been way higher. At least that's what Pat McAfee says.
Okay.
He's a diehard Colts fan, so I'm inclined to believe him.
But I just feel like everybody points that Deshaun Watson 35-5 or something like that is like with no offensive line, no weapons, that being the quintessential. But how many years did he truly show that he is the top of the top? 3? 4? I'm gonna pull up
so he was drafted in 2017. He would have been the rookie of the year, but he tore his ACL. Had an incredible season in 2018. Went to the playoffs in 2019, and I believe 2020 as well. Because in 2020 that was during COVID, and they I believe that's when it was, and that's when they went 4-12. He put up almost 5,000 passing yards behind a terrible
48, but that's not even that big of a deal in the modern NFL. 5,000. He has 70% completion rate. I mean, he's good.
His
He's very
team
good.
was
He
4
hasn't
and
have a
12.
longevity to it. There's only a 3-year sample set, 18, 19, 20.
Yeah, but look at what he's been able to do in that amount of time.
Sure.
I mean,
That's good. It's
his
promising for
numbers
sure.
more than promising. I mean, his numbers are exceptional.
I would say to go far as to exceptional. Look, I would say they are good quarterback numbers. Look, he had a 70% completion rate. That's awesome. Hey, thumbs up, triple thumbs up. 4,800 passing yards is not it's a lot. But in today's NFL, 4,800, man, we're 4,000 yard passing seasons are starting to become common. I bet you damn Kirk Cousins had a 4,000 yard passing season this year.
Also,
33 touchdowns, 7 interceptions is cool, right? I mean, that's cool. 33 and 7, but here they were 4 and 12. And I know that can't be all on the quarterbacks on the offensive side. But at the end of the day, are some of these, who knows, part of this is that, hey, maybe they're throwing the ball so much because they're always behind. Maybe his numbers are a little bit heavy because they were always chunking the ball late in the game.
Yes.
I'm not saying that it's fraudulent, but this is not like trading for, we haven't seen him do this for 6-7 years and him being the most elite time of his career. And there's no doubts. Now he's got a missing year on his record. And he is look, Justin Herbert is 1 year away from ultimately being as accomplished as Deshaun Watson.
I mean, Justin Herbert's special though. But do you see how there's something definable about all these quarterbacks that's special?
Why am I not making any sense? Am I speaking another language, T. Thompson? He said Tony is not making any sense.
Oh, I've already read a bunch of shit about me too. They think I'm going crazy offering these picks for Deshaun Watson. I mean, listen, Tony, you're not really wrong though. I mean, one of the things that you have to kind of take into context, a few years ago, people were talking like Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes, that you could make an argument that those were two of the most talented quarterbacks in the NFL. Okay? I mean, that's really what people were talking about. So understand, this kind of player normally doesn't get traded.
Right.
A player who does this, who is able to put up those kind of stats. Also, in that year, Tony, that you almost threw for 5,000 yards, they were 4 and 12. They had a terrible defense, as you alluded to, and they had an offensive line that was almost as bad as ours this year.
And no weapons. They didn't even have any offensive weapons. They even have DeAndre Hopkins that year.
Right, because they traded them all away. They traded away most of their weapons.
I saw this one throw that somebody put up a clip. They were like, this is what Deshaun Watson does. And the whole pocket breaks down and he just zips it down. And it's like a 40-yard gain. It was awesome. I think this. Now, I don't want you guys to take my comments out of context. I'm not saying Deshaun Watson is not a very, very good elite player. I'm just saying this is we have a 3-year sample set. It's not like the craziest, longest sample set in the world. Just an observation. But that's a good thing. He's young and he hasn't had any unsuccessful seasons, right? He hasn't had a bad season.
Right.
He's had all good seasons. He's gotten better each season until he stopped playing. And the other thing too is I don't want you to take this out of context, folks. Is I think that Deshaun Watson I would rather have him than Lamar Jackson.
Yes, definitely.
And that's the way I think about it. And I'm not a Lamar Jackson hater. I would roll with Lamar Jackson as my quarterback. So I put him in a class that is ahead of it. But man, we got to see this guy back on the field soon.
Yeah, and I think that because of all of his legal trouble, if you will, and that has taken up so much of the spotlight and the narrative around him, and rightfully so. I mean, we're not just talking about any kinds of allegations, So it's definitely going to be a heated conversation, but I think that largely because of that, people have kind of disregarded what he was able to do in that short amount of time, and that he really truly is a special quarterback at that position. And, and I wanted to ask you this, Tony, since we're on the topic of it, the fact that we're hearing reports that David Tepper is so interested in Deshaun Watson, even despite of all of the accusations being levied against him. What does that say to you? Because to me, from my perspective, it sounds like if he was willing to take that kind of gamble, it seems to me like that private investigator that he hired probably came back to David Tepper and said, it looks more than likely like there won't be any criminal charges against Deshaun. So you're probably dealing with some misdemeanor charges, and he might have to take care of those. But it's really, if that ends up being the case, it's nothing that's going to truly prevent him from playing NFL football. Again, I'm kind of speculating that, but does it make you think any differently about David Tepper, considering his eagerness to want to go and get this embattled quarterback?
No, I think this fits his MO. I think this fits David Tepper's MO perfectly.
Yep.
And it's actually kind of cool in a way. Is that I know, look, is that this is colored by the fact that this is some people would say, like somebody I put on Twitter said, I don't want a rapist. That's what they said. I was like, good God. I mean, like, and I don't know the details of what happened enough. I know there's the accusations, and I don't even know is that. I mean, I haven't looked at it in a year and a half now, too. So, like, I'd have to go familiarize myself to see just like the severity of all of this. I think it was the volume that was the most concerning, more than even the severity at times. At least if my memory serves me right. But I think this is, I almost don't even care what the investigator said. As long as he comes back and says that that this isn't a Bill Cosby moment. Right. Like to that degree. And you're on mute though, just in case you are trying to comment back. But, as long as this isn't to the point of, and who was the guy, was it the Saints dude or whatever that was roofing everybody? And he, like, as long as
that's that guy's name.
Hold on, it'll come to me in a second. But I don't even care if they're really criminal charges. Like if these are misdemeanor crime, at the end, like as long as he ain't doing jail time. Number one, I would think that I won't say who cares, because I'm not trying again, I'm just saying this, the world isn't as ethically driven as people want it to be. So that's what I'm saying is, guess what? Who cares? No one cares. The world don't care. I'm almost more interested in, I want to know if Tepper's got some inside. These guys have to try to be getting a bead on what Roger Goodell's punishment for him would be. I think that's just as important as if what the outcome of this is going to be, because basically the outcome is this: is either he's going to have to pay these women a bunch of the money, he's going to have to pay them some money, he's going to have to pay them some money and pay some legal fees to get out of some legal charges. But I don't see a scenario where he's going to jail, probably. At least it has not seemed like that. And if it is the case, then what the hell is taking so long?
Yeah,
imagine suspecting of someone of murder for 7. It's like, good God! Just make the arrest, damn it.
And Tony, that's what I heard online too. That if they had a real case, if they had legitimate evidence, that they feel that could actually levy criminal charges against Deshaun, that it wouldn't have taken this long for them to finally bring something to the grand jury, and that they actually would have had a much more legitimate case. At least that's what I saw one sports lawyer say on.
I would just think if you committed a crime, he can't be delaying the prosecutors from charging the case. And there's only so long that their investigation that they need before they're getting railroaded. So I'm not even worried about that. I'm just really interested in this. You make this trade, and then Roger Goodell tries to come out and look like the NFL is back on the pro women, pro shield, and then suspends them for a year. That would suck.
Yeah, for a year, that would.
Yeah, and I almost wonder if the NFL is just going to straight up say, look, is despite that, the kind of uncomfortableness of some of these accusations, no legal charges were filed.
Yeah.
And Deshaun Watson ultimately sat out an entire season in penance for these crimes, regardless of whether or not. So he's kind of like, it was time served.
Yeah, that's what someone in the chat room was saying too. That it could potentially, that you look at how long that he's actually had to sit out. Now he was paid during that time. I don't know if that makes a difference. But by the way, I did put up a poll in the chat room. If everybody wants to go and vote on it, I put which trade is best. Trade scenario 1, I have up on the screen right here. Brian Burns, Jeremy Chin, CJ Henderson, and 3 first-round picks. Trade scenario 2, CMC, Robbie Anderson, Shaq Thompson, or 3 first-round picks. Trade scenario 3, Robbie Anderson, Shaq Thompson, Jeremy Chin, 3 first-round picks. And trade scenario 4, Robbie Anderson, CJ Henderson, Brian Burns, and 3 first-round picks. Again, they're steep, y'all. They're very steep. I know that they're steep. But many of the things that have been said about the Panthers and their likelihood to get Deshaun, a lot of it is true. We don't have a ton of draft capital. So we're going to have to give good players, and we're going to have to give good draft picks in order to make this work and actually go and get this player. And Tony, before we got out of here, I wanted to bring one more. I thought about something else, and I think it's worth mentioning who the other players are in the Deshaun Watson scenario here. The Seattle Seahawks, now because of them trading Russell Wilson, they have a bunch of draft capital to be able to potentially go and get Deshaun Watson. So they're a competitor. You also have to think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are probably going to be heavily involved in trade talks for him as well. I thought about this and I wanted to run it by you. If you're Deshaun Watson and you have all this stuff looming over you, don't you think Charlotte would be the perfect environment for him to go to? Like we talk about Carolina's not having, a giant market, right? The media here isn't like it is in Philadelphia and New York. It has more of a hometown vibe. Don't you think potentially Charlotte, North Carolina, and this area would possibly benefit Deshaun instead of going someplace like Tampa Bay, which, no offense to Tampa Bay, is literally the strip club capital of the world. I'm not saying Deshaun frequents them either. I'm just saying, don't you think that this environment might be just what the doctor ordered for a player like Deshaun who has been through so much?
Well, I think the optics would be better than like a Miami, right? I mean, if you think of that as like because of that, like you said, that the town, the profile of that town, and like how like we associate it with such a extravagant party life. I think that you make a good point when it comes to the media pressure, right? Like going to the Giants. Gosh, the media. I almost think Philly would be a decent spot to go just because they're kind of like a tough boy town, and like maybe not, but like I think getting in the NFC East, I almost think about what division he goes to, because look, is that he comes in and has success, gets a team to the playoffs, all of a sudden the storyline gets easier. You know, it just easier. The questions become less about the off-field stuff and more about the on-field stuff. But he's struggling. If he comes out struggling, how many questions are going to be like, how much do you think this is related to all the time off? How much do you think that is? Are your mentals right? Is that, you know what I mean? Like whatever it may be. So I do like that argument. I also think this is that among the divisions, the NFC South is an attractive destination right now to make a splash. And I thought Indy was going to be a great destination, but then you reminded me that's their division.
Yeah, that's in division.
All right, done. All right, so out. Throw that out. I don't want to go there. There's a reason Aaron Rodgers stayed in Green Bay and didn't go to Denver. Straight up, he didn't go to Denver because, well, first, I mean, he wants to be loved. Aaron Rodgers wants to be loved by everybody at the end of the day. and now he's going to be the hero. He's going to be the hero of Wisconsin forever. But if you look around his division, Detroit, no quarterback. Vikings, no quarterback. Chicago, no quarterback. They're gonna win their division for as long as his contract is there. I think if you go into the AFC, some of those divisions are tough, man. Like, think about this: is Russell Wilson? Can you believe David Carr is the worst quarterback in his division?
Derek Carr.
Derek Carr. Derek Carr is the worst quarterback, and I'm not saying that should ultimately, like, he should be the best quarterback in the division, but the worst. That's a good damn list of quarterbacks. Maybe Pittsburgh. Like, I mean, but you still got Burrow over there. Like, right now, the NFC South is ready to be taken over.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's part of why you hear David Tepper being so eager about this. You know, Tom Brady is now out of the division. No more Drew Brees. We don't know how much longer Matt Ryan has in his career. Like, that was part of the reason why it was so hard to see the Panthers be so bad this year, is that, it represented a time frame in which our division rivals have notably gotten weaker. And for us to be able to make an upgrade like this at the quarterback position, yeah, man, I mean, this would be absolutely huge for us from a player perspective. And then, Pittsburgh, apparently it's being reported that no one in their front office has shown any interest in Deshaun Watson up until this point. So I don't know.
That would be a good spot. I was thinking about this as Seattle. Is Seattle too progressive of a town? Like, are they the ones that are going to be the ethical mobsters?
It's funny you say that. I saw a tweet from one of their Twitter people. He had a check mark. He was a Seahawks guy. And he was like, I would seriously understand if Seahawks fans called their fandom into question if we traded for Deshaun. And it had over 3,000 likes. So,
yeah, because that's a town, like, they don't even drive cars in that town almost. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like they are I would just probably guess that it's a very liberal town.
Yes. Very.
Which is strange to say that liberal people would be less accepting of somebody. Anyway, there's some irony. That's some irony in that. But yeah, I mean, I would think that is, again, you raise a good question, is the media market here. Look, they would treat him with kid gloves. They wouldn't even ask him hard questions. I bet you they would ask him one question at the beginning and be like, then like at the beginning of training camp, like, how's it feel to be back? And that question would probably be like, how's it feel to be back on the field?
Yo, Dave Newton would have some fire questions.
Oh, I told you he's the best. He would. Yeah, he would. He'd be coming out swinging right away.
Yeah. By the way, you totally converted me after we interviewed David Newton. I think you're right. He's a mad scientist.
Yeah.
And we weren't open to his level of genius. But
actually, you know what? You didn't know, but you were. He was reeling everybody in as it was. They just didn't know it. They thought they hated him, but guess what? They read his shit more than anybody.
Yeah, they definitely would. It's going to be interesting going forward, Tony. I didn't think, at once upon a time when it was the Philadelphia Eagles and the Miami Dolphins, I even remember saying to you at one point in time, like, there's almost no way that we make this happen. There's so many other teams with so much more firepower. But man, as time has gone on and teams have kind of dropped out of the race, it's really, I don't know about your opinion on this, but the more time elapses, the more and more I genuinely think this is a real possibility. Let me tell you, if I didn't think that this was a legitimate possibility, I wouldn't have, spent the 2 hours,
an hour and 10 minutes talking about it.
To throw all this together. I think this is something that, again, if you love or hate the idea of Deshaun Watson being a Carolina Panther, you at least have to be open to the idea that it is more and more a possibility every day.
Yeah, I gotta believe this is David Tepper wants him more than anybody. The one concern I have about this, and it's not about him, it's like Matt Rule. Like, I mean, like he's got to look at this and go, gosh, guys, like, yeah, I think I can turn this offense around. I think that, all right, then what if he says, hey, I'm not even that opposed to, I think Charlotte might be a friendly destination for me at this time. But he's got to be going, damn, I'm going to have a new head coach, though, in 2 years. Or I'm the reason he's going to keep his job. Right now, I just don't think there's anything that screams confidence in our coaching staff surviving very long. And I think that that's a detriment to the attractiveness of our team.
Yeah, unless it comes in and his performances ends up saving the job of Matt Rule. And by the way,
that would almost what would that mean that Matt Rule's a good coach though? Or would it just mean that like we could all do it if we just had like I could be the head coach of the damn Packers and win that division?
It's certainly a thought-provoking question, right? I mean, superstars are superstars for a reason. They put your team, they put them over. But that is a good question too. I mean, if you're Matt Rule, you have to almost hope that this is what happens, right? Because if you can't win with the Deshaun Watson, Christian McCaffrey, DJ Moore, like if you're not able to field a competent offense, then dude, you have been pantsed for the world to see.
Yeah.
I kind of think Matt Rule wants this more than anyone.
He needs it. He needs it more than Mitch Trubisky. This is
for sure.
I've been continuing to ask for the last several months, what is the viable pathway for Matt Rule being the coach in the future? And if there is one viable pathway, this is probably the most viable. You get a badass quarterback and all of a sudden your offense is cooking and you know what, and you let Matt Rule give his rah-rah media speeches or whatever it is, and all of a sudden everything's roses. His job gets easier. Everybody's job gets easier. But, man, you get Mitch Trubisky and Malik Willis, go ahead and you probably say, hey, I'm not shitting on Malik Willis, but probably Matt Rule won't probably save Matt Rule's job.
No, I really don't.
So you're right. He's over there with Tepper. Go, man. I think he's a good guy. I think a lot of these accusations are probably just. And Jesus says forgiveness.
Dude, I bet you tomorrow. So most people don't anticipate that we're even after tomorrow that we're going to have very clear answers. So again, even if we have some clarity tomorrow, we're not going to have full clarity tomorrow.
What's exactly happening? They're going to tell us if they're bringing charges or not. The grand jury sits.
Yeah, so the grand jury is going to listen to testimony from a few of his accused. I believe it's 8 witnesses. And then Deshaun Watson will also be required to take the stand. But him and his lawyer have already made it clear that they intend to plead the fifth. If you actually go on my Twitter, there's this lawyer who represents other sports athletes. He did an entire thread about it, and I reposted it and put it on my Twitter. He's made it seem like Deshaun is basically going to be pleading the fifth because I know I'm going to butcher it, but there would be no reason to give up something right now when it's looking like it's only going to potentially be misdemeanor charges. I know I'm butchering that. But on the off chance,
it's usually not good for you to speak, period. Generally, you rarely see people testify in their own defense because the burden of proof lies on the prosecution.
True.
So the worst thing you need to do is get up there and be a lack of like an uncompelling witness to where the jury just doesn't like you. So it like that kind of shades their opinion, is they just didn't like your answer to the question. It doesn't really make you either more guilty or less guilty. They just didn't like it, because they're emotional human beings too. So I'm surprised he's even compelled to testify in his own grand jury case. I would figure you have the right to remain silent.
But I heard it explained like, part of the reason is if you're pulled over on a DUI, and you say to them, oh, I've only had 2 beers. A lot of people think that's a good thing to do because I've been drinking, but not that much. No, it's the worst thing to do because
That's
what
right.
you have done is tell
Just
the
give a probable
officers
cause.
that you have been drinking that night. So it's a similar thing with Deshaun going forward. But what I'll say is this, man. If it ends up that Deshaun isn't going to face charges for this, you have to imagine that everyone in the Panthers building is going to do a backflip because now that gives them permission to literally be as aggressive as they want to.
It opens a door on the PR to make it work. If he's not getting criminal charges, you can say this is that Deshaun Watson's embarrassed about this situation. We don't condone any type of malicious behavior towards women or people in the healthcare field, if you call masseuses, that whatever that is. But the justice system has panned out here, and it's time to move along. And again, just to add to this, and this is not probably advising people to drink and drive, but I've asked it, like, what is the best thing to do if you get pulled over by a cop? And a district attorney told me this, like a guy who prosecutes this case and a guy who represents these cases. You should just say, I will not do or say anything without my attorney present. Yeah. You shouldn't you're not compelled to do any of the tests. You're not compelled to do anything. You just say, make them arrest you. And when my attorney gets here, I'll figure out what I want to do. And then he'll tell you, like, so hey, that's the truth. Like, you should just be quiet because the police are always trying to find something to incriminate you. And that's what this prosecutor is going to do, is that if they're going to bring this case, they're going to want to win it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And by the way, Perfection in the chat says Watson is not testifying before grand jury. He's taking fifth at deposition in civil suit, which also happens on Friday. So, yeah, he has no reason to give them, more information than, than is necessary to do so. Again, go to my Twitter. I reposted a really good thread that breaks down the ins and outs of what's going on with Deshaun Watson's case. It also says to me why I feel David Tepper. I don't know this for sure, but I get the feeling like David Tepper and the people that he has hired have they have a reason to believe that Deshaun Watson is going to beat this. Now, whether or not that is legitimate, whether or not they are right or wrong, that's a whole nother story. You would have to think David Tepper would have to think that if you're going to make this kind of trade, for a player that, might still face charges. So I don't know, Tony, this is definitely going to be interesting going forward. Do you remember the last time the Panthers were even involved in a discussion for a trade that would potentially be this big?
Never.
Yeah, never.
They were never involved. The biggest trade that the Panthers were ever part, was it a trade? There was something Gilbert. He was the uncle to, who was that corner? Like Daryl Revis. I think he was Daryl Revis's uncle or something like that. I might be wrong on that, but he came from Washington, and he was like this giant acquisition. And this was in the first couple of years the Panthers existed. And he's like, it's like you're getting Khalil Mack type thing at that moment. And he didn't work out. I'm trying to think of acquisitions, trade. Greg Olsen, probably the biggest trade the Panthers have landed in a while or ever.
Yeah.
Acquiring him, he made a big difference to the team. And it was a cheap, but we've never been involved in a blockbuster deal. This would be a blockbuster deal. This would be unprecedented for not only the Carolina Panthers, but this is almost like a sort of unprecedented trade in itself. You know what I'm saying? It's like one thing. I think even trading Russell Wilson was a kind of a bizarre twist surprise for Seattle.
Yeah.
I don't know why you would do that. He must have been unhappy in a way that or something, but you just usually don't trade away good quarterbacks despite whatever,
Truly unprecedented, man. I was even saying before all the accusations came out that Deshaun Watson essentially forcing his way out was unprecedented in and of itself. Like, you normally don't see quarterbacks that just got paid basically saying, hey, I'm not going to take another snap for this football team. So, yeah, it's crazy times, Panther fans. Crazy times as the Carolina Panthers continue to deal with these, these urges to upgrade their franchise quarterback position with an embattled quarterback, man. And listen, longtime fans of C3 know this. I'm a Clemson fan. I've been watching Deshaun Watson for a long, long time. I mean, the guy has all the talent in the world, and if he's able to be here, I have no doubt that our offense would look night and day difference than what it was before.
Here's a question to think about, a topic to think about if this were to happen. How long would it take before people started to have a legitimate conversation if Deshaun Watson was the best quarterback in Panther history?
Oh,
how
man.
many seasons? I mean, think about it, because we know who the best quarterback in Panther history is. It's Cam Newton.
Sure.
And I feels like he's going to keep that position for a long time right now. But if Deshaun Watson comes up and puts 3 playoff appearances for the Panthers together, he's of a caliber player. You know what I'm saying? How long would it take before you come on this show and you say, I think it's time we have the discussion, is Deshaun Watson the best quarterback in Panther history?
If he picks up
3 seasons
left off, Tony, it could even be less than that. If he picks up, look, okay.
Would he get comeback player of the year? Would that be even? Oh my gosh! You would say no. You could not say because he had a great year when he left.
But also think about, and let's just be real, because we're Cam Newton lovers, okay? But think about all the Cam Newton haters that would just be quick to jump on, Deshaun Watson and, say that he's the best quarterback the Panthers have ever had. Listen, it's still a long way out. He would have to do a lot of proving. I don't know. I tell you what, man, for a second-year general manager, this is all a very tall order for Scott Fitterer. Let me tell you, when your billionaire owner says, hey, you are now being tasked with getting Deshaun Watson on this football team, that's a hell of a thing, man. Tony Dunn, I certainly appreciate you joining me for this little impromptu thought experiment that we just did tonight.
I love it. I don't love it. I wish that we had our quarterback. I wish we wouldn't have to be thinking about these things.
Right.
But it's easier to sleep at night when you got a franchise quarterback. As long as he's not sleeping beside you, obviously. You might be a little nervous then.
Yeah. Man. So by the way, let's look at the results of our poll. The results are in trade scenario number 4 with 33% of the votes. So that would be this one right here. Robbie Anderson, CJ Henderson, Brian Burns. Yeah, a close number 2 was trade scenario 2, which was this right here.
CMC.
Yep, CMC, Robbie Anderson, and Shaq Thompson. Trade scenario number 3 was in third. And trade scenario number 1 came in dead last. That would definitely be the hardest for us to swallow. But I don't know, man. Thinking about Deshaun throwing to Robbie Anderson, DJ Moore, and Christian McCaffrey, and the potential of being able to grab maybe a Charles Cross with the 6th pick in the draft. I don't know, man. That would be pretty enticing, but the fans have made their voices heard, Tony Dunn. That's what this channel is all about. C3 Panthers podcast, a show for the fans, by the fans. Tony Dunn, you have anything you want to tell our 120 strong viewers still hanging out with us right now?
Yeah, I would appreciate if you guys just support the podcast by smashing the thumbs up button, subscribing on YouTube. Hit that notification bell if you like the content we're putting out. We're also available on Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcast, right? So if you're not able to watch us live, or maybe you don't always consume your content on YouTube, add us, add the audio version of the podcast. That could really help us. And again, play around with that clip feature that YouTube is integrating now. If there's a part of this show that really stuck out to you that you want to celebrate, make fun of, we'd like for you can help us grow. What we need to do is just get in new people's ears. But what it is that the people that come to our channel come back. They come back. Like, we've developed this if you look at the views to sub ratio we get, it's like crazy, like how many of the percentage of our subscribers watch our content. It's very high in comparison to other YouTube channels, and that is even very successful ones, right? So like we're trying to develop a community. I just got a message, and it was Big Al. You remember Big Al Hardy? I'm gonna go back and look
on Twitter.
On Twitter, Big Mike. What was his name? But he sent us a message, and he said this: I just found you guys. Look, I'm a Panthers fan living in, I think he said, Missouri or something like this. And he said this is like, I just found you guys. I got ultimately saying, I wish I would have known about this sooner, because like you guys are doing exactly what putting together type of content. A loyal, dedicated Panthers fan who does not have access to local media markets. So help us reach other people. You'll be surprised about how many people that are on your Twitter timeline that don't know about things that you know about. Right. So that's it. It's like, hey, it's really, I know it sounds like I'm begging for you guys to share the show, but like, it's almost as cool to just say, I watched this cool podcast or listen to this. Look at this. People come for Tony, but stay for Cody. Is that like it? That does a lot. So when I see people putting content out, I like to help support them and grow it. That's what I ask for you guys.
Yep. Hey, by the way, I like that comment too.
Oh my goodness.
Hey, here we go.
Hey.
But I appreciate you. To everyone who thinks I'm crazy, you're 100% right. I am batshit crazy for a potential franchise quarterback. Again, feel free to make fun of me when all this busts and none of it ends up happening. But by the way, before we go, I didn't mention this too. Deshaun Watson and his agent now follow the Carolina Panthers, and
awesome.
He doesn't follow any of the other teams that are supposedly in.
It's happening. It's gonna happen.
It's gonna happen. I really feel like it's happening, dude.
Me too.
I really do feel that way.
I don't think we have less odds than other teams actually right now. Yeah. And I felt like we did, like you said a year ago, it felt like we didn't have a team, a place. But it sounds like a lot of the team, I don't know, the dust is starting to settle.
Yeah, it really does feel that way, man. It's exciting times, man. Tony, I feel like sometimes the most exciting times for the Carolina Panthers is when we really have nothing going on. Like it's around the off season and when it's around the draft, when we're like, thinking about what the Panthers could be potentially. So
shows you the brilliance of the NFL. There is never a downtime.
100%. But hit that like, hit that subscribe. You know that we're going to have our ears to the ground whenever something happens. Keep it tuned to the C3 Panthers podcast for all your Panthers news and opinion. Once again, my name is Cody Lashley. You can follow me on Twitter at Cody Lack, CODYLAC. Join me tomorrow where you can be a part of this conversation directly by coming on the Friday free-for-all. You will have the opportunity to join the show. I posted the link to the StreamYard in the chat room in the description. Come be a part of this discussion. Tell me how bad my trade scenarios are. That's tomorrow at 7 p.m. right here on the Friday free-for-all. Tony Dunn, where can they find you?
On Twitter at cat_chronicles. And you can check us out on Facebook, CarolinaCatChronicles.com, C3 Panthers podcast on Instagram, I believe. But basically, we're here on YouTube and Twitters. That's where I hang out. I hang out on Twitter.
That's it. Well, the C3 Panther family, until tomorrow, keep pounding.